Hello and welcome to NBL's UK Electronic Communications Regulation and Enforcement Update. My name is Robert Bell. I'm a founder director of a legal consultancy called BCRS, and I act as a competition and regulatory consultant with a number of law firms. I have over 30 years experience advising on complex competition and regulatory matters. And this has taken me into advising a wide range of international technology and media clients, in particular on new media and telecommunications regulation. So today we're going to be looking at how electronic communications networks and services are regulated and how that regime is enforced in the UK. First of all, we're going to be looking at why the EU regulatory framework from which the UK regime emanated still matters. We're going to be looking at in more detail about how the electronic communications regulation in the UK is set out and enforced, taking in key legislation, the regulatory system, some examples of regulatory enforcement. We'll be finally looking at telecommunications products safety regime and how that is enforced in the UK. And then finally, we will be looking, just concluding with a few remarks about themes and the future. So let's look at the EU regulatory framework and why it still matters. So notwithstanding Brexit, the EU regulatory framework still underpins the UK regime, and most current regulatory obligations began as EU legislation. There are various directives which lay down minimum requirements for member states' regulation of electronic communications networks and services, and these individual directives were codified into EU law in the Electronic Communications Code, which we'll look at in a minute. Secondly, the EU principles were also enshrined into UK law in the Communications Act 2003.